Welcome back to the Brew Bot development series. It's been a couple of months, and a lot has happened. If you've been here before, you might remember way back in the day when I used to upload YouTube videos on this channel, and I had just finished trying to learn how to animate my character. And before that was a solid 5 months of trying to make my character move without turning 2D and falling through the floor. And that brings us to why this video took so long. Not because it's extra good, but the opposite, because it's really bad. I basically spent the last couple of months clawing my way out of the prototyping phase for this game. That way I could move on to the fun visual stuff that's better for making videos out of, which will be a nice change of pace from the boring, beginner-level, unengaging programming stagnated by a total lack of significant progress, which was a genre I was sort of pioneering and thought would be a big hit. But very soon, we'll be getting to the stuff that I've been waiting for. Because as it turns out, making a game is kind of a two-part thing. The second part is what makes people want to make a game, and the first part is what makes people only want to make a game and keeps them from actually ever making one. Because that first part is the prototyping. It's the building of the foundation, the boring, invisible, unsatisfying, messy, impending doom of creating your own garbage code and poorly structured data that you know for a fact will come back to bite you later. Okay, but it is fun though, I swear. It's almost like the first step is actually making the game, and the second step, where you build levels and make new enemies and all of that stuff, is kind of more like modding a game, because you're building content for something that already exists. And that's what I need, something that exists. I need to get to the point that I can say, hey, this is like a video game, it just needs some levels and stuff. So that's where I'm starting from here. The goal is to have something that feels kinda good to play. It ain't gotta be crazy, but it's at least gotta feel like the worst video game I've ever played. Cause then it's a video game, and all I have to do is make it better. And the way I'm gonna get to that is by making a tutorial level that embodies all of the game's basic principles. Specifically, I wanna get enough done in this video that you can feel that gameplay flow happening. Alright, sounds like a plan. Where were we? Right, that evil character animation that I hate doing so much. It unfortunately made the most sense to do this first, since I was still fresh off the subject from last video. Plus you guys gave me some good feedback, which was mostly that I should use more animation principles. So I just added a crap ton of squash and stretch to every animation and called it a day. I also finally made a basic rig for the arms and legs like you guys have been wanting me to. And I really thought you guys were overstating how much this would help, but once I got it set up, yeah, man, this is way better. I didn't even have to animate him, he just started walking and I recorded it. So, okay, yeah, you guys were right, I was doing it the hard way for no reason. But hold on now, you guys also told me to use bendy bones that one time. That was a literal straight up prank. So yeah, I might be a little skeptical sometimes. After updating a bunch more animations, which was now easier, but still not something I like doing, I brought the new Brew Bot model into Godot. Alright, nice, looks like crap. Yeah, these animations are way better. Aside from the fact that if you just barely hold forward enough to walk just a tiny bit, you just kind of gently spaz out. Well, that and the other 900,000 strange glitches strewn throughout Brew Bot's animations. And fixing them is going to be real fun with this Winchester mystery animation tree. Some nodes open into state machines, other into blend trees, and some don't seem to do anything at all. My movement script sucks too, because it's just too convoluted. So I went ahead and split the state machine code into its own script. Now at least it's more manageable. And I would have then gotten right to fixing that weird unorganized animation tree, but unfortunately 11 hours of random coding kinda got in the way. Most of which was spent making weird useless features pertaining to the animation visuals that all looked and felt bad and got scrapped. I did realize though that I was not really going anywhere. Wish it didn't take 11 hours to realize that, but I decided the best thing to do to regain traction was to get away from my computer and just read up and take some notes on how to use the engine and write better code. I was hoping to find some information on fixing your weird broken animation tree, but alas, there was no chapter on that. Instead, I found lots of other useful stuff, like how to use while loops and how to set up class structures. And so now, armed with newfound knowledge of while loops and class structures, I took on the entirely unrelated task of fixing the animation tree. I made a backup in case I can't get this all working again, and deleted the animation tree. This time though, I had drawn up a plan for how I'm gonna make this tree work. It took a couple hours to get it all back in order and weed out all the new glitches and whatnot, But now that it's all set up, we've got a way more readable and expandable animation tree. And this is the kind of boring garbage I was talking about. This is why I've been saving all of this footage for one video, because this is not fun to watch and not even that fun for me to talk about. You know what? Let's just skip ahead to the good parts. So remember that one time when I learned what class structures were? Well, that's going to come in handy now, because I need to make more enemies, because this game is definitely going to have more than one enemy, probably more than two, and I could just type out all of the basic enemy code every single time and have to make changes to every one of those scripts every time I want to update something, but instead I'm going to make a script called enemy class, which is going to be a generic enemy script. Then below that you can imagine branches going down to different movement types, like chase or ranged. Then finally at the bottom will be the actual enemies themselves, and the only things that need to be on those scripts are the things that that specific enemy does. And then the way that they move is handled by the movement type you give them, and anything tagged as an enemy will be able to have health and take damage and get killed and all of that basic stuff. Using this system is going to be really easy. The problem is, I haven't been using it, so I need to try to extract the generic enemy stuff from the mossball script, as well as the movement behavior. And holy crap, it works. Yeah, I know I just described how it works, so I shouldn't be surprised, but it's still cool to me that he's walking around and taking damage and stuff, even though that code isn't directly on his script. There's one more change I want to make to Mossball, because I'm going to have a lower tier enemy that chases and bumps into you to damage you, so Mossball should have a different way of attacking. I decided on an AoE Stomp attack, which has a few components to it, but was mostly easy to code. You can kind of think of coding as a two-part thing. And yes, this is the last time I'm going to say something is a two-part thing. It's just that saying things are two-part things is a two-part thing, and that doesn't count. But basically, you start coding a feature by trying to create a trigger, setting up the conditions for something to go off only when it's supposed to. Then you make the actual event that goes off at the request of that trigger. Sometimes it's the trigger that's all the work, because it's such an intricate combination of conditions to get the right behavior, and other times it's the event, because it's just a complex function. I always start by trying to print a line of text to the console when the event should happen, which for this Stomp attack was as simple as, if you're close enough to Brew Bot, do the Stomp event. It was until I added a million more conditions to get it to not happen in the air and in weird situations. Now that I have the trigger, I can make the event, which starts by firing a stomp animation. Then it animates a damage indicator ring that I made in Photoshop to let you know he's about to stomp and where it's going to hit. Then, once he stomps, it enables a damage area that reads for Brewbot's hitbox and sends Brewbot a damage signal if it finds it. And it also plays a particle effect that I made, which looks kind of like rocks or dirt getting kicked up, which is well worth the 70% of your GPU that it probably takes to simulate one of these. But hey, this is pretty cool, and broken as always. If you get close enough but you're below or above him, he'll just sit there and stomp forever. And he can also still jump on your head, which was all fun in games back when he didn't have a stomp attack. I came up with a not so elegant solution for that problem, where he tracks if Brewbot is within a certain X or Z distance, but below him on the Y axis, which means he must be right over top of Brewbot within some margin that's meant to account for the width of your character. Then, if that is the case, it locks up his normal movement code and launches him away in a random direction, giving him back his movement once he's landed on the ground. Well, that should be good for Mossball. Let's make those low tier rank and file enemies next. I decided to make them these little onion creatures, as you can see here on this page of incoherent schizophrenic chicken scratch. Concept art, I like to call it. Now unfortunately, back at the beginning of this series when I was just randomly making stuff like the Mossball model, I didn't make an onion enemy model, so he's gonna look a little placeholdery. All of the enemies in World 1 are just gonna be default shapes for now. I'll make models and animations and stuff once I'm done prototyping. I added a bunch of features to these guys to make them interact as a group better, like trying to keep their distance from each other while chasing you, and getting knocked back and taking damage when they get punched into each other. I took a quick break from making enemies to add a new move to Brewbot's platforming arsenal, the long jump, or we'll call it far jump. That sounds more new and not stolen. Basically, it's this genius idea I had where you crouch and briefly have a window to do a jump with extra distance and less height. And I gotta say, it's completely broken OP. I'm not complaining though, this is fun. I'll nerf it if it makes the game less fun at any point, but that's certainly not what's happening right now. This game is starting to look more like a long jump based platformer. Far jump. One thing that kind of bugged me was that if you walk into a wall, you just keep walking instead of stopping, because the animation is being driven by Brew Bot's velocity, and velocity in Godot isn't how fast something is moving, but it's more like how fast it's trying to move. So I made a true speed variable, which is based on how much distance you've moved over the last frame, and made the walk animations read that instead. I also didn't multiply it by delta, which I'm just now realizing, so if your frame rate is really low, your animations are going to go stupid fast. But the good thing is, now you get some visual feedback when you hit a wall, which is a small thing that could make platforming feel more readable. The next thing I did was less of a feature and more of a gameplay change, which is that enemies now drop coffee beans after dying instead of when being hit. And that's because I'm going to be changing how coffee beans work. I know, I keep changing these things. It's probably best if you just tune me out and see how the game is once it's finished. But the plan now is to not have abilities that cost coffee beans. Instead, you're just going to grind them to heal. I know that might make it sound like the combat is going to be super lame now, but the more I work on this ability system, the less I care for it. I'm not really a fan of your being able to use most attacks being contingent on your having punched enemies. I'd like the combat system to be more self-contained and at the ready. So instead, I'm just going to have the basic punch to attack with, as well as the parry move and healing. And all of the interesting fun stuff is in how you use those to interact with enemies on the level. You might not be sold, but just hang in there. It should start to make sense at some point. As for that healing feature, I was able to get a basic version of it working, which gradually exchanges coffee beans for health. I also changed Mossball a little bit. He now uses a new enemy movement class I made called Stalk, which emphasizes staying near Brew Bot enough to keep him in range of attack, but not close enough to get hit by Brew Bot's attacks. This works via two bubbles, one far and one close. The Stalk enemy tries to keep you in the far bubble and out of the close one, by backing up or chasing accordingly. And while we're working on the enemy AI, I might as well make the onion enemies a little bit smarter. I want to make them communicate aggro to each other, so that if one enemy sees you, he'll tell his nearby friends about where you are. And I should probably just go ahead and make this on the enemy chase script, so any chase type enemy gets this behavior. First, I made 3 slots for friends, which are filled out by the 3 closest enemies that are of type chase. And that's what's kind of weird about setting this up. It's code on the enemy script that tells other instances of the enemy script to do something. So I need to set up the sending and receiving of the same signal on this script. I'll go ahead and create a function called something like temporary aggro chase, which chases Brew Bot just for a moment. The temporary chase then gives up if you don't ever enter his actual aggro radius, or if he does get you in the actual aggro radius, that chase function will take over. But I also need to send the signal that triggers this event out to up to 3 of his friends. With each enemy running a copy of this script, it's kind of like Lego blocks that snap together. So now, going near any of these guys is going to aggro most or all of the group, rather than just the one closest enemy. And the cool thing is, I can shrink or scale up the communication bubbles on different enemy types to make them more or less cooperative. Another thing I thought would be cool is if Mossball could damage the onions. So I made the onion able to take a new damage signal called hazard damage, which could be anything that hurts them aside from Brew Bot. Well, you know what? The enemy AI is working pretty nicely. So nicely, in fact, that they fight themselves. Maybe I'll take the damage away at some point and just have the Stomp knock them back. But let's get back to Brew Bot and make a couple of animations. The healing and parrying animations specifically. I exported those and got them all set up in the animation tree and everything, and put that healing animation on the heal ability. I retimed the ability a little bit, so that you consume 1 coffee bean for every spin of the handle, which heals you 10% of your health. Now as far as the parry goes, we can't really make that ability since we have nothing to test it on, because I don't plan on Mossball or the onions being parryable. It's supposed to be for either one-on-one fights against enemies that have deliberate melee attacks, or for deflecting ranged projectiles, and is going to be a visual indicator of some kind for which attacks are parryable. And as it turns out, deliberate melee and ranged enemies are the last 2 enemies I'm going to make for this world. I'll do the melee one first. This is going to be the big scary golem enemy when the prototype is finished, but for the time being this is going to be the big scary capsule enemy. I thought making a Dark Souls style attack would be really hard to do, but I realized it was really as simple as animating a damage area to follow his attack. Then I made that attack parryable by also reading for the Brew Bot parry area and getting parried if it finds it, which makes him take more damage for a moment. At this point in the project, I've been working my way down a little list of features, and the next thing on that list was fall damage. Some games have it work on a timer that starts when you leave the ground and ends when you land, and that's fine. until you get stuck falling in some weird spot and then manage to free yourself and die instantly. So instead, I'm going to have it read your Y position when you leave the ground and again when you land, and then get the distance. And to prevent you from sustaining a dozen minor injuries when walking down a staircase, I'm going to add a threshold of a certain amount of distance fallen before it damages you. But then I can use that distance number to make you take more fall damage the further you fall. Well, by the looks of it, there's only one more feature left to steal, and that's wall jump. Or 90-degree flat surface rebound hop. Wall jump. This sounded kinda complicated, but also kinda easy, but it turned out to just be kinda complicated. The idea itself is simple, but there were a million little details to work out. It was really boring, and it took a really long time. Oh look, it's magically done, and I don't have to describe the process in detail. Let's move on. Now that I'm past that hurdle, I can add the final enemy, which is gonna be a ranged enemy that shoots at you. So I made the enemy itself, which I think is the coolest looking one yet, all imposing and cylindrical. I also made the rectangular prism that he's going to fire at you, which has its own script attached to it that launches it forward when it spawns. Then the enemy just needs to spawn instances of those projectiles. That's when I ran into a problem with a very easy solution. The arrows have gravity. There's a very easy solution to this. Oh, but my solution? Add a strange precise number to the velocity of the projectile so that it increases when too far and decreases when too close, requiring well over an hour of trial and error to find that number and get it perfectly dialed in, but still full of jankiness. Or, another good idea, just get rid of the gravity on the arrow. Just make it fly straight forward toward Brew Bot. I could still use this code later though for a bomb throwing enemy or something, so maybe it wasn't a total waste of time. Now that the arrows are flying like normal, as in how they normally would on the moon, I can make them parryable, which just sends them backwards and makes them now emit a hazard damage signal, which will damage enemies. Okay, now, as long as I don't find some excuse to get distracted, I can finally start making that prototype level, right after I get through this list of distractions. Look, I didn't want to do these things, but it hit me. There are several very necessary features that I still don't have, and have been putting off ever since the beginning. And those features are a hub level to enter to other levels from, object interaction, saving the game, and some kind of openable menu with an exit world option. I guess I thought I would just get away with never making these, or that I'd be some pro game developer in my 50s before I'd have to worry about making my game save progress. But no, here we are, not a pro, and not even in my 50s, and I have to make my game save. But let's not do that first, that sounds impossible. Let's start with the hub level, which is going to be a cafe when it's done being gray cubes for like half a year. Once that scene was made, I set down the world selector, which is actually a sphere with no code on it. Part of the reason I'm making the cafe first is because it's going to count as two of the items at once, since to launch into other levels, I'm going to make an object that you interact with. So that'll be object interaction done too. So Brew Bot needs to be able to interact, which means making an area on Brew Bot that reads for interactables, and sends an interact signal to any interactables in that area when you press E. I specifically made it only interact with the closest interactable to Brew Bot, so you don't accidentally interact with a bunch of stuff at once. Then I made a script on the world selector, which opens a menu when it receives the interact signal, and this whole crappy menu is managed by that world selector script. I actually felt really good about how that menu code turned out. It felt like a real accomplishment. It's really cool because what it does is it gets the files that are in the levels folder and makes a list out of them. Then it makes another list out of their names with the last 5 characters truncated off, removing the .tscn file extension from their name. Then it displays those names as buttons on the menu, and when you click those buttons, it gets that world name before the tscn was removed and reattaches scenes/areas to the beginning of that name, thereby getting the file path again and using it to load that scene. Well, I thought it was cool. Now that we have 2 of those things knocked out already in just a couple hours, let's see if we can make that openable start menu. I started by making a similarly low quality paper plate looking menu, which this time is on Brew Bot and is opened with the escape key or start button. And it's got a back to cafe button, so now you can enter the weird fever dream test level and exit straight back to the liminal cube space again. I was shocked to have all of this working so fast. I seriously thought this stuff would add another week to this prototype, but it only took a handful of hours. Well, so far. Because saving and loading is still left, and that still scared me pretty bad. I read up as much as I could on the documentation page, or I guess as much as I had patience for. Then I started making a game saver script on Brew Bot, which does all of the saving and loading. I literally just verbatim typed what the documentation had, trying to at least guess what each of the lines were doing. Sure, the documentation tells you what the script is doing, but it might as well be in Chinese when you aren't already familiar with the subject. But I did start to grasp some of the basic concepts. Apparently, you need to put a save function on each script that you want to save data on, since the game saver script is going to try to call that save function on any object tagged as a savable object. Which is another thing, you need to tag all of the objects you want to save, because you don't just save everything like you're taking a picture of the whole game. You only save what you need to, like how much money you have or what levels you've unlocked. And the save function itself is actually really simple. It sends the game saver script a dictionary of the variables that need to be saved. You can think of a dictionary like a stat sheet or an item card. It's just a list of names tied to variables. Then some kind of magic happens, and that stuff is saved on an external file on your computer, and the info that's on that save file is used to recreate those saved objects. And as alien as all of this was, I actually got it to work. No way! Then open the game. No way! That actually worked. Okay. I was saving Brew Bot's position from where I saved and exited, but I don't actually want to save Brew Bot's position, so I'll get rid of that. Instead, I'll make it save the amount of money you have, and since that object is getting completely deleted and recreated when I load the save file, I need to save its position on the screen as well. I also need to give it a file path, so the money counter needs to be saved as its own scene. That way it can be reinstantiated from that template. But wow, this is pretty cool. I can actually save exit farm money, which is way more than I thought I'd get working in a single day working on this. Which means now, after just a couple of days, I've finished that list of late prototype features. I'm now all clear to start making a prototype level, actually getting to put things together and try out different gameplay elements, getting to do something closer to game design and level design. This is where my second-rate great value coding starts to turn into a second-rate great value video game. So first I've got to create a new scene, which the world selector should recognize automatically. Making it recognize levels took upward of an hour to code and isn't likely to save me even an hour of work, but it's cool and automatic, so I feel pretty good about that. Now that we have some gray cubes in an empty scene, it's starting to feel like home, but we're gonna go even further than that here. Instead of using static bodies with mesh instances and box colliders, I'm gonna use CSG shapes. If I want anybody that isn't already making their own game to enjoy these videos, I should probably stop saying crap like that. Basically, CSG shapes are for making levels, and they are not what I was using before to make levels. So I'm at least making the level out of level stuff this time. I'm also going to go ahead and throw some textures on stuff, since I already have a few made, and they're super easy to apply. And already, just jumping around on this weird random structure is almost fun. It's definitely not fun, but it feels like it's just about to be, which seems like the perfect time to add controller support to the start menu. If I showed every time I fixed a random unrelated issue while in the middle of something, we'd still be back at remaking Brew Bot's animation tree. But now menus work with controller, so if the game ever ends up on console, you won't have to plug in a mouse and keyboard for the menus. Now let's get us some interesting platforming made. I'm not really planning anything out, just throwing things around and jumping on them to figure out what kind of platforming Brew Bot's movement lends itself to, which at the moment seems to be platforming of the bad and unsatisfying type. So I changed how his jump works a little bit to have less air control and cover less distance. Yeah, to make it less bad and unsatisfying. But it worked, since the issue was that his normal jump and long jump were competing too much. And this stuff right here is why I need to make this level, to get things dialed in to that last degree, since now I'm kind of playing the game, so I can really feel when something is slightly off, or when a feature needs to be added, which is exactly what happened next. I was wall jumping between these two awkward ledges when I noticed how much there needs to be a way to get yourself up over a ledge that your jump doesn't quite clear, cause slamming your knees into a wall and plummeting, that doesn't feel good. At first I gave him the ability to punch himself up over ledges, but it was both extremely unsatisfying and inconsistent, and very cheesable. You could just choose to fly with it. So instead, I'm gonna have a more traditional ledge grab, but without the shimmying left and right. I really don't need that. It's just a way to recover from a slightly short jump or reach a high ledge. Here's how it actually works. I have a raycast above and in front of Brew Bot's head that freezes him whenever it finds a floor. Then, if you jump while frozen, it'll boost you up and unfreeze you. This got to a working state really quickly, but of course had a ton of issues to iron out. But they did get sorted out, and now it works very consistently. It feels like this was a huge missing piece that makes the platforming flow together so much better. I'm already getting to the point that I'm thoroughly enjoying messing around with different scenarios and coming up with cool routes to take on things. You can also now avoid fall damage by ledge grabbing or by wall jumping. And just in case you want to wall jump off of the top of a wall and not get interrupted by a ledge grab, you can hold crouch while in the air and you won't ledge grab anything. This is kind of tricky since you need to time the crouch button just right to not mess you up, but it's less of a standard move and more about giving you the option. After that, I built a little ledge grabbing based platforming section on this right wall. You don't see much ledge grabbing based platforming, which is because of how sucky and unfun it is. But the point of this tutorial level is to teach you what moves you have. The first room specifically is supposed to be really open, mostly just different shapes and things to test moves on and get the feel of the platforming, like these two cubes over here, which you can just barely long jump between. And I can have some kind of NPC or something over here that tells you that you've really got the timing down of the long jump if you can make it across the gap. I also put down a coin over here and a few more in some other areas around the room, to kind of incentivize you to go and check out each area. And as for the coins, I've been going back and forth on having decorations that you unlock and or purchase to put in the cafe. But recently, I realized that I really should have something at least in that vein. Something to reward you for exploring, and to get you to push the boundaries beyond what's necessary to just beat the level. So these coins are theoretically going to be for purchasing things. And an even higher caliber reward for harder platforming, combat scenarios, or hidden discoveries will be unique decoration unlocks. While messing around with the ledge grabs, I found a pretty bad glitch. It turns out you can grab any ledge that the ray hits, even if it's inside another wall. So I'm grabbing this lower ledge from within this higher wall, which I specifically placed here to prevent grabbing that ledge. I had a hard time figuring out the fix to this, but when I did, it ended up being really simple. I just made a very short distance ray that casts upwards from the one that reads for the ledges. And if that ray finds any floors, this ledge must be blocked, and so you can't ledge grab. Well, there's that taken care of. I'd like to have something that's slightly difficult in this room. I went ahead and made a hollow room in the middle out of a CSG cube with another CSG cube parented to it and set to subtract mode. Then I'll put some stuff at the bottom and test it out. Sweet, now you can jump in here and grab your coins and use your wall jump to not be able to get out and get all motion sick from the horrible camera angles. The weird reason you can't wall jump is because I typed a line that doesn't let you wall jump multiple times on the same wall, and since this room is made out of one cube, that line reads it as one wall. So I just got rid of that line entirely, since the exploit it was meant to prevent isn't really a threat anymore. But that doesn't solve the camera issue. I tried at first to improve this third-person camera that I'm using, which is an extension that I downloaded and not something that I made, and it proved to be very uncooperative. But I do like it a lot, and making my own camera that's this good sounds super crunchy and headachy, and I'm not doing that. That's when I realized I should actually make an area that when Brew Bot enters it, it switches to another camera, which is in a better fixed position. Then, when you leave an exit boundary, it cuts back to your main camera. And I actually just now realized while rewatching this footage and writing this script that I could make this even better by having that fixed camera follow you slightly, like having it change its Y position up and down as you climb up out of this room. While I was testing this camera guide, I had a fake glitch happen, which is something that does occasionally happen, because I tried to go down into the room again after leaving the area to see how it would deal with that, and I just froze, which I really thought was a glitch with the camera not switching right or something. But no, it wasn't a glitch. I was just ledge grabbing the wall really close to this brick, and since there's no animation, I really couldn't tell I was ledge grabbing. I guess that's one reason to at least make a crude placeholder animation in the prototyping phase. Not that this provoked me to do so, I just now recognize that I'm actively making the wrong choice by continuing not to. But having this camera guide rig is seriously cool. I love how versatile and easy to set up it is. I could just set it down anywhere and adjust the camera and the two areas and have all kinds of cool camera angle changes, but it's really just for areas where the default camera is particularly disagreeable. After that, I went ahead and made one more improvement to ledge grabbing, which took it from functional to actually nice feeling, which was to make the climb up more controllable, so you can actually jump up away from the wall now, or towards it to get moving faster at the top. But if you don't do anything, it at least makes sure to put you up over the ledge. Then I moved on to adding some random little features. I made another pickup like the coins, but one that gives you coffee beans. That way you can collect them outside of just killing enemies. I also made a slow walk feature, mostly for keyboard users who don't have real speed control. That way you can make really careful movements or drop over a ledge more slowly. That way you don't have to do that annoying thing where you feather the W key to drop just over a ledge and still end up coasting past the platform below. And then maybe my favorite thing that I've added, a first-person camera, which you can switch to by holding Alt on the keyboard or right bumper on the controller. You can also zoom in and out with forward and backward on the left stick or W and S on the keyboard. You can't move or anything. It's just for getting a closer look at things, taking screenshots, or just getting a cool immersive angle of where you are. Although for a minute there, it was literal straight up first-person mode, but the movement was severely broken. And the last thing I did was make high jump a bit more of an investment by adding a short timer that you have to wait before you can activate it. There's going to be a visual indicator, but for now I'll just import a sound effect that I made with a coffee mug and play that when it's ready, which is another thing I haven't done before but came together really quickly. And you know what? This is good enough. Publish. This feels like a game. Adding new features is happening so much faster now. It's just way more obvious what things I need to add and change. Of course, the prototype level isn't finished yet, but that's not to say that prototyping hasn't done most of what it was supposed to do. I'm seriously thrilled with how well this is coming along. And now I'm ready to make this tutorial level happen. I'll be working on that, adding the few features we've still got to add and doing lots of designing and experimenting. Just a whole lot of super fun stuff that I've been looking forward to for the whole 8 months I've been working on this. As for when the stuff that I'm doing now will be uploaded, I'm hoping a lot sooner than this video happened. This one took so long because there was so much to figure out in the game to get us to this point. A faster paced, more visually interesting point. The point where people who just play games and don't make them can actually relate to and understand a good amount of what's happening, or at least appreciate it more. I'm hoping that now I'll be putting out more interesting videos and faster, since we've finally moved past those dozens of attempts at making animations and movement code and all of that boring garbage that we've been stuck on ever since like August or September. Of course, I can't promise anything. I'm still gonna upload when it feels right to, but I do believe that that will be faster than every 2 months. I'd also like to be uploading shorts videos pretty frequently, some of which might be unseen footage or commentary from videos like this one, where lots of that kind of stuff was cut to keep pace. There was over 100 hours of footage to go through for this video, and I'm already 2 months without a video, so most of the commentary and finer details were completely glossed over to get the bigger picture. But I think it would be cool to share some of those moments as shorts videos. Well, I'm really excited about what's to come. The videos from here on out should be a lot more like the first 3 videos I made in this series, where we're designing levels and making textures and models and all of that stuff. Messing with the art style, designing and programming boss fights, making the cafe area and collectibles, recording and creating sound effects. There's just so much interesting stuff that I can't wait to get into. Anyways, that's all coming up next time. I appreciate you watching. Thanks. I'll talk to you later. I'm supposed to say I'll talk to you. It's been 2 months. I don't remember what I'm supposed to say. I appreciate you watching. I'll talk to you later. Thanks.